Hello, I'm Graham Horton and welcome to the final part of this video tutorial series where I've been looking at the Panasonic Lumix FZ80 or 82 camera for new users. So the FZ82 is a camera which has been designed, I guess, for people that like the long telephoto zoom. This camera has an effective focal length of 1200 millimeters when it's fully zoomed, so you can get some fantastic teleshots. There are some downside to this camera, in as much as the fact that it's a 1/2/3 inch sensor, which does mean that we are limited to the amount of depth of field, in as much as there is a tremendous amount of depth of field. Even when we're using this camera at f2.8, which is the widest aperture at the wide angle setting, the depth of field is quite large and equivalent to something like f11 on a full frame camera. So trying to get those nice headshots with blurred backgrounds means you're going to have to use a mid telephoto setting, something like 600 millimeters. Get as close to your subject as you can, probably 2 meters away, but have your subject well away from the background to enable you to get those blurred background, as the camera will be using something like a f5.6 aperture, which gives you something like f22 on a full frame camera. So you can see the comparisons there. Also, these sensors tend to be quite noisy in low light situations, so if you're having to shoot in low light and raise the ISO, you'll find that your images are plagued with noise. So the golden rule is to try and keep your ISO as low as possible, and wherever possible add additional lighting in the form of artificial light or use flash to increase the exposure. So in this final part of this video series, I want to look over some of the issues that have been raised in the course of the 5 videos, and then look at some of the accessories you might want to add to your camera to enable you to shoot better pictures. Well, the first question has been regarding the lens hood on this camera, and I always recommend that you use a lens hood. Don't use secondary filters such as UV filters or skylight. They will degrade your image quality in as much as either they're pure optical glass and you get distortions in there, or worst case scenario you're going to get flare and ghosting from those filters. So I don't use an external filter on here. This lens hood protects the lens from external damage. Only if I'm going to be in a very dusty environment or an environment with sea spray will I fit an external filter on there. But this wide angle hood is 55 millimeters, which is the thread diameter of the lens, but it flares out to 77 millimeters. So I use 77 millimeter filters on this camera in conjunction with other cameras I have. But this 77 millimeter gives you that nice wide angle effect and doesn't vignette at the widest angle setting. So it's a nice hood. It was on Amazon, and I'll put links to that in the video description. Now the other thing was the little jewel that I placed on the video record button. Normally that's the red record button, but it's difficult to find when you're trying to shoot video, so I just glued a little jewel on there. It actually came self-adhesive, so it's a right diameter to fit on that button and gives a nice tactile feel. And the other one was, of course, the eye cup on the back of this device. Normally the plastic is quite hard on your eyes, and if you wear spectacles it's even worse. So this is a little rubber eye cup. It's the Nikon DK20. It's still available from Amazon. You can either double side tape this to the lens frame, or as I've done here, I've used super glue to stick that on, as I really want it not to come off. So that was an addition. It does give you a nice view of your viewfinder, seals off your eye to the viewfinder. You get a much better view for your images. So that was the other modification people have been asking for. So today I want to look at using filters. The one you're most likely to use if you're just shooting stills is the circular polarizing filter. And the circular polarizing filter adds about 1 stop of density to your shot, so you can reduce your light a little bit in sunlight. But the main effect is to actually reduce reflections on foliage and water, that sort of thing. Only works if the light is 90 degrees to your camera. So if you're trying to shoot behind the camera or in front of the camera, you won't notice any effect. But if the light's to 90 degrees to the side, you'll get maximum effect from the filter as you rotate it. You'll see the reflections go from water or from foliage, and I'll demonstrate that a little later on. The other thing we'll look at is shooting in the 4K post-processing mode, so you can actually use that to select a point of focus if you haven't got it quite right, or you can use that to do image stacking. So if you've got a close-up that you want to get the full amount of depth of field, you can use focus stacking in an external program like Helicon Soft or Photoshop to enable you to combine those photos into one which has got much larger depth of field. I'm also going to take a look at a feature in this camera called 4K live cropping, which gives you the pseudo effect of using a camera slider. You'll find that in the movie record setup menu. You've got to be in the creative video mode, so that's with the mode dial set to the movie position. You'll find you've got 4K live cropping there on page 1 of 5, and it's available to enable you to use a 20-second or 40-second traverse of the scene. So it actually makes a 1080p from a 4K video, and you define the start and start points. So I was showing you how you can use that. Now, you've probably heard me mention many times in this video series that the way to getting good images and video is to always use the lowest ISO with this camera. This camera will go down to ISO 80 without any extension, so you can actually use a very low ISO. It doesn't mean you've got to be using quite bright conditions, or if you're in dark conditions, use the widest aperture available, and that means using the widest angle as possible to enable you to get to 2.8. The more that you use telephoto settings on here, you're going to be raising the aperture due to the fact that this isn't a constant aperture lens. So as you start to extend your telephoto setting, the light level is dropping and the camera has to either lower the shutter speed to enable it to get the correct exposure, or it has to raise the ISO. Once it starts to raise the ISO beyond 200, you'll notice you get softer images and a lot more noise. So it is really important to try and keep this camera down to ISO 80. You can see many images in this series where I've shot with 80 ISO in dark conditions such as forest, etc. Sometimes you've got to use a mechanical support for the device, so a tripod or a monopod, or rested on a tree or something like that, to give you the steadying effect, so you can use longer shutter speeds. Obviously, if there's any subject motion, you're going to get subject motion blur, and that will preclude you from using those lower shutter speeds. So what I'm really saying is, if you want the best quality images from this camera, always use the lowest ISO you can under the situation that you find yourself having to work in. Okay, let's go outside. I want to show you the circular polarizing filter and its effects. I'll show some plants around the garden, and you can see how it can reduce the sheen on the leaves of things. And also, if you shoot in skies and landscapes, you can use this to darken the sky to give you that dramatic effect, especially if you've got white clouds amongst it. So let's go outside and I'll shoot with a camera. And so the first thing we're going to look at is the use of the circular polarizing filter. So I fitted that to the 77mm flared wide angle lens hood of this camera, and we'll be showing you the effect of the circular polarizing filter on the highlights of the leaves. So if we start to film this in 1080p, first of all, you can see the shine on the leaves, and I'm going to turn the circular polarizing filter until it cuts out that shine. You can see that it's approaching that cut point now, and there's about the maximum cut. The sun is exactly 90 degrees to the plant, so we're going to get maximum cut from that, and I think you can see that's quite a dramatic effect. So there I think you can see the effect on the cloud. There's no circular polarizing effect, so the actual sky is quite light. If I turn the polarizer in now, I think you can see that the sky darkens and it accentuates the clouds. We're now going to look at the 4K live cropping, and you'll find that under the motion picture record setup menu with the mode dial set to the creative video position. So pressing menu set, we can set this for 20 seconds, and now it's going to ask us to define our starting position and our starting size, so we can actually position where you want the starting box to be. And it's of course a 1080p crop from a 4K video, so the frame is going to be fixed format 16:9. So we'll set that as the starting point. Touch set. Now it's asking us to look for the end position, so I'm going to move the cursor over to the right hand side so the duck stays in frame, and we'll click set to show the ending position. And now when we press the shutter button, we will start the 4K live cropping in operation, and you can see that it starts and progresses across the image where you've defined your start and end point. So this will take 20 seconds to traverse from one side of the frame to the other. You can use 40 seconds if you wanted a longer traverse. So finally, here are some shots taken with the FZ80 around the garden, just looking at some of the plants and just give you an idea of the quality you can expect if you use the camera properly. Well, that's it for this series covering the FZ80-82 camera. I hope you found some useful tips along the way. If you have, why not share the series with your friends and they'll get the benefit of this series as well. And don't forget, if you've not already purchased my user guide for this camera, it's available from my store page on my photographic blog, and it's available as a PDF download. Also, the book is available on Amazon if you want to purchase the black and white or colour version. I recommend you buy the black and white version, It's the cheapest way to get the manual, and you'll then get a free PDF if you email your Amazon order number to me. I'll send you the PDF free of charge. If you just want the PDF on its own, you can get that from the store page. So thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate all the comments you've made on the series. It does encourage me to make future videos, which will be on another bridge camera. So until then, thanks very much for now. Take care and see you all very, very soon.